Hey, been a while, innit? Well, let's not waste any time. Moon Knight is one of the best things to come out of the MCU. I'll be honest, I did not know a lot about this character before the show came out. And like I said before, the live action MCU shows have been kinda all over the place. So those two things combined and the show being as good as it is took me completely by surprise. I was not expecting Moon Knight to be as good as it is, and it took me and everyone by storm. And now, Moon Knight is really fucking popular. There are obviously a few issues and we're gonna go over them, but Moon Knight just might be the best MCU show. Let's put on the suit and find out. Where, oh where to start first? Let's go over the real meat of the show, how about that? The story is incredible. Those first few episodes where it built the mystery about what the plot actually is was so freaking engaging. I think it goes without saying that most people enjoy shows that you can't predict what's happening next, because it allows you to get sucked into the story. That's why shows like Falcon and Hawkeye don't really do anything for me. Moon Knight isn't really that complicated of a story, but that's the beauty of it. Simply just not telling the audience what the plot is enough to get us invested. By the time we know what the villains want and what our heroes need to do, we're already invested. Now we can just enjoy watching it unfold. And there's still mysteries yet to be solved later on, and it's just done so well. I can't express how fun and exciting it is to see Steven black out and then come back and there's just carnage around him. That mystery is enough to get us going. The characters are also really good. No one is annoying and everyone pretty much fits into the plot naturally. Layla fits into the story really nicely and actually does stuff besides being the love interest. I love Khonshu as a voice in our main character's head, and he's really sassy. I really like the trope of an antagonist-like figure being in our main character's head and only they can interact with. It's been done in other stories and I just really enjoy seeing it. Arthur Harrow is a very great and interesting villain and is written pretty solid. He has a good motivation, rides the fine line between reasonable yet insane, and Ethan Hawke's voice is just sexy as hell. I can't be the only one thinking that, right? Speaking of characters, I think I feel myself switching. Oi love, MC Roadhog here, and I'm going to talk about Steven and Mark. Oh, how absolutely smashing! I absolutely love the dynamic. This is such a stupid bit. Why did I write this into the script? Oscar Isaac deserves all the praise and more. He is so talented in this show that's kinda scary. Seeing him switch so effortlessly between Mark and Steven was like actually watching someone with DID. It's not just his voice either, his facial expressions, mannerisms, body language. In episode 5 where both personalities interact with each other physically, you can tell the difference between the two despite both being Oscar Isaac. How two big franchises wasted his acting ability is just beyond me. Oh, and like I said before, the dynamic between both characters is really good. Steven getting wrapped up in this is tragic, and it's one of the few times the MCU has made you feel bad that the main character becomes a superhero. I know tragic origin stories are a staple for superheroes, but when was the last time you really wanted the main character to just not be involved at all? Mark is equally interesting and also has a tragic backstory. The characters were handled very well despite being two different personalities in the same body. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been to write, but props to them. The uniqueness of the show is another positive. I think since Phase 3 ended that the main gimmick of the MCU isn't the superhero stuff anymore. It's charming characters combined with a unique setting. That's why Loki and this show are so popular and well received, while Black Widow and Eternals aren't. People don't really care about superheroes fighting the big bad anymore, they just want wacky shit and this show delivers. Episode 5 is one of the best segments of the entire MCU. Seeing our characters' origins and them coping with their trauma, learning that they need each other while in a creative setting is way more interesting than Moon Knight beating up goons. This is another positive point for me, which is the show is just so much more engaging when it's not about Moon Knight. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing him in the suit and fighting a bunch of guys with guns is enjoyable. The action is pretty good since it's the MCU, you kinda gotta have that right. But I'm glad that they don't focus too much on that and instead focus on what's important, the relationship between Steven and Mark. The relationship is what makes the show, and if they got that wrong, then Moon Knight wouldn't have been as well received as it was. The score is also pretty good. Okay, so what did the show do wrong? Well, not a lot, surprisingly, but the little bits they messed up on are pretty distracting. Let's get the first and most obvious one out of the way. The CGI could have been way better. I'm not gonna count this too much because it's not horrible CGI, but it is a little distracting in some areas. This is mostly due to the fact that it's an MCU show. You'd think that Marvel, the most popular franchise today, would have enough money to make all of their properties look good. I mean, we all saw Spider-Man, and while that movie was good, we can all agree the CGI wasn't up to par. That movie literally needed a CGI patch while it was still in theaters. It's just a little nitpick, but it kinda adds up. Another big one is the tone of the show. Overall, the show had a pretty serious tone with some light bits of humor, which I thought worked. I think the areas where the jokes did not get in the way were fine, as it made those moments not dull and boring. They gave it a little bit of life. But they went a little overboard in some areas. Most notably in episode 2 when Steven puts on the suit. This is right after a very serious and engaging moment between Steven and Arthur. So to go from that to haha funny suit moment was kinda distracting. It also messed with the pacing a bit. Fortunately, the show doesn't have too many of these unnecessarily quirky MCU moments, but those small ones stick out a lot. Finally, to bring up the issue most people have recently. The ending. People had a lot to say about it. Some say it was too short, it wasn't that satisfying, they were confused of the end credit scenes. Here's my take. I think the last episode was just okay. I think the length is okay because I saw episode 5 as part 1 of the finale. That's where the big character moments are and where the most important arc happens. Episode 6 was just to provide the final fight, which it does. The end credits scene was to show that Khonshu did keep his word on not using Steven or Mark, but he never said anything about Jake. With all the teases they made for Jake, this is exactly how I wanted him to be introduced. He didn't take up too much screen time, but his small appearances was still cool. I have only 3 main issues with episode 6. First, the kaiju battle is a little unnecessary. I saw that the gods didn't really have a physical form anymore. That's why they needed avatars in the first place, and that they could only control, like, weather or their surroundings. But I guess now the gods can just beat the shit out of each other by themselves. It just felt like they wanted Khonshu to do something during the final fight and to interact with Ammit a little bit, but I don't know, I feel like they could have done it differently. The only thing I could think about watching these 2 giant kaiju fight was, could only Arthur, Mark, Steven, and Layla see all that happening? It's just kind of distracting. Second issue is how Arthur lost. Don't get me wrong, I kind of geeked out when I saw that Jake was the one to beat the main villain. But it is a little bit of a cop-out to have your main antagonist lose off screen. I think this is the part where a lot of people didn't find the ending very satisfying. Maybe if they did it differently, where Jake doesn't completely destroy Arthur, but just gives Mark an opportunity to beat him, I think that would have been received way better. Finally, my last issue with the ending, and this is a big one and I don't see a lot of people talking about it. Layla's story arc is not in the last episode. The biggest part in episode 4 was that Layla did not like Mark. She was pissed at him because Mark was involved with killing her dad. Not even that he killed her dad. It's just that he was there. And that was enough to create a bind between our 2 main characters. This is her one important part in the story, besides the fact that she loves Mark. So to have that arc not be mentioned at all in the last episode was really surprising. She pretty much disappears once Hero's defeated, and when she's on screen, she's just kicking ass by herself. I get you need some loose ends for season 2, but this isn't really a loose end. This is her one personal tie into the story, and it needed an ending. All we needed was one heartfelt conversation between Layla and Mark, and that would have been it. I guess you could argue that she forgave Mark eternally when he died, but come on. This is a TV show. Something like that needs to be said so that we can understand what the character's going through. I know show don't tell is a really big thing, but that's doing a little less than showing, if that makes sense. At the end of the day, though, this is another banger from Marvel. It's stuff like this that makes me so happy that the MCU hasn't failed to make good content since Phase 3 ended. Yeah, we've had some ups and downs, but it's not like the MCU as a whole has been perfect. Moon Knight is a fantastically written show. Do I like it more than Loki though? That's kinda hard for me to decide since I like both of them for kinda different reasons. I see Loki as a really good stepping stone into Phase 4. It's pretty much the launching point for all this multiverse stuff, and it's done in a really engaging, but in a really plot-driven way. Moon Knight, however, isn't really connected to any of the MCU stuff, and it's pretty standalone. It serves to just tell a really good character-driven story. So it's really up to, do I want a plot-driven show or a character-driven show? I can't really decide between the two, so I'll just say Moon Knight gets the same score as Loki for me. Moon Knight gets a 9.